Hello, everybody. I'm just fixing something on my screen. I see we've got Casmania and Valander and Kiriniko and hopefully a few other people. Let me see, do I have this adjusted correctly? There we go. And there's Gwyndy. So a lot of K people and then Valander the Red and hopefully a few of my lurker friends. Let's see what we can get up to today. So I do have a plan. I do have a plan for the day. And what is my plan? No, I know what my plan is. My plan is to talk about the value of painting a miniature again, and I guess I'm going to show you the first miniature I ever painted. Actually, I'm going to show you the first two, and we paint one of them hopefully, and then also, what was my other thought? Now I'm losing my thoughts. Hopefully, I'll make more sense as the show goes on. I will switch over to the other view now. And where's my gray? My nice gray thing. For the camera. Which, let me know if you think it's not bright enough. I think I fixed it, but I don't know for sure. So, last week, I was working on these guys, which I'd actually started, I think, in February. I did for Valentine's Day, we talked about pink. So I did a pretty pink miniature at the time, but I wanted to come back and finish up the monster. So they just had a base coat at the start of last week. So if you want to go back and watch the video, that is what you will see me doing. I was reflecting on the brain painting later. If you watch the show, you might recall that I tried painting some of blood vessels on the brain before I did anything else. And my theory was that would help them kind of look integrated and not so painted on. I would say that this was not a complete success. I think that the subsequent painting, I mean, you can kind of barely see it in a few places. It didn't do anything bad. It may have added like a little bit of color depth or something. But mainly, I would have to do work on top of that. So maybe I demonstrated to myself that trying to do that stuff in advance, if you're going to work a lot on top of it, isn't maybe a time savings technique. Not that I'm known for time saving techniques, but because I make mistakes like that all the time. And then this guy, we piled a lot of gloss sealer on at the end to make it nice and slimy. Well, I did use some gloss sealer just on the blood bits. So that was last week. So I'm going to show you some stuff later when things are drying. But I'm going to switch just for a minute to the other view. So to do the painting, I'm going to use the Learn to Paint colors, so from the first two kits. But then also I got these while I was at Reaper. I haven't swatched them or anything yet. That's something else I could do while paint is drying. So I thought I took the paints out, put them to the side. But I thought I would show you these expansion sets. So if you have the Learn to Paint kits and you don't have a lot of other paint, these were specifically designed to kind of fill the holes from the kit. So if you have the core skills kit, it doesn't have a red and it doesn't have skin tones. So that's the kind of thing that I was adding to the set. And then sort of the opposite for the other one, because it does have lots of red and lots of skin tones, but I added, green and things like that. And I added purple to both of them because purple is very useful and was not originally in either of the sets. So I'm just gonna get rid of these pillow packs for now. And then if you get it, there's information on the inside of colors you can use either from the expansion set or the original set that it goes with for shading and highlighting or dry brushing and washing. So there's a little demonstration of all of the colors. Oops, I did think I did that one upside down. All of the colors in use. And I think so if you wanted to buy the Learn to Paint kits for a friend, I think they now make a version where it's a combo of both. So you get the original paints from like the core skills kit, and then you get the expansion paints in one of the little plastic carrying cases. And presumably it also includes the pamphlet as well as the original set instructions. So when I designed the kits, I designed them to work together as kind of like one monster kit. And this has turned out to not be very obvious to people. I guess I didn't think about that at the time, because people will be like, well, how come there's no red in this? And it turns out a lot of people don't feel comfortable. Like they feel like layer up, even though I tried really hard. We didn't call them 1 and 2. They're not 1 and 2. I consider each of them to be a learn to paint kit that you could start from scratch with either of those kits. And I wrote them that way. In fact, when you start hearing my story, you'll kind of see why I did that. But apparently a lot of people are nervous that the layering is too advanced and they don't want to, that I don't think that kit sells as much. So then people aren't getting the benefit of the color thing. So this way with the expansion kits, they can get colors that are missing from their set. Yeah, I think the first one also has a gold because the first, the Core Skills Learn to Paint kit only has steel colors. But there's like a bronze in the layer up. Anyway, enough of that. We'll go back to the main view. So way back in the day, this is 2002. So I got married in 2002. And hold on, I think I moved the camera by accident. Let me zoom back out. Yeah, it should be about here, and I'm going to make sure that it's squared up for my OCD friends. So I got married in late 2002, and then I learned to drive. So I had lived in a place where I didn't need to know how to drive. But when you move to a smaller city in America, you definitely need to know how to drive. And then I think that June or something, so I'd been driving for like a few months, I had my license and stuff. We're like, you know what, let's go to Gen Con. So 2003, that was the first Gen Con that was going to be in Indy, and we're like, well, that's a 6-hour drive. We could probably make that, even in our crummy old Toyota. And because we had both for years been seeing Dragon Magazine and other things where they'd have ads and articles about how awesome Gen Con was, and we're like, wow, that would be super cool. We hadn't had much of a honeymoon. So we did. At that time, you could decide in June, and you could get a hotel room downtown and go to Gen Con. This is no longer true. You could also get into all kinds of events. But we had a marvelous time. And one of the things I got to do was go to the paint and take. This is not the miniature I painted at Paint and Take. I don't consider the miniature I painted at the Paint and Take my first completed miniature because I didn't really, I barely got color all over it, and then it was time to move on to some other events. But I had wanted to try it because I'd been seeing this Learn to Paint kit from Reaper in our local game store, and I'd been super intrigued about it. But I'm like, well, I didn't want to spend $25 in case I don't like it. So the irony in this story is how much money I spent after that one Paint and Take when I discovered that I did like it. So when I got home, I bought the kit and I painted this guy. But I had also been reading articles. I was already on Cool Mini, so like I had some familiarity on an intellectual level, not a practical level, with miniature painting. And also to put in context, this took me 8 hours. So I haven't tracked like the time for every miniature that I painted, but I do remember that this guy took 8 hours. And so there are 2 miniatures in that original kit, which this wasn't even, Anne didn't write this, I don't think. I think someone wrote this, and then Anne did a revised version of it for the 2nd edition. Butts points out that this is an excellent hobby for people who like buying doodads. Yes, if you like spending money. You don't have to. That's what's kind of nice about our hobby. You don't have to spend a lot of money, but if you like spending a lot of money and you like experimenting with stuff and you like getting cool basing bits and all that kind of stuff, you can go nuts, and perhaps I have done this on occasion. So the first set, the kits you can buy now, I think, are the 3rd series that Reaper's had. And the first series, it started with this guy. There was this guy and a rat, so it was armor and fur, and then the second one was cloth and skin. And I think Anne did updated versions of those later. She may have done them. I'm not sure, but I meant to get. I'm sure I have the instructions around somewhere, but what's also as interesting is the changing in printing, because I'm pretty sure this paper folded over was the instructions. That was it. And the pictures were like an inch big or something. So advances in camera technology and then printing for what you can show with miniatures and then now film. Because if we want to talk about old ass stories, I remember when the first kind of film clip showed up on the internet for miniatures, and it was like 5 minutes of some guy painting a little view window or something on a mech, and we were just like, and I don't think it was really like the first video. There was a guy who had a VCR tape that he sold through game stores. I think my game store just didn't happen to have it, so I didn't hear about it till later. But that was kind of like the first thing on the internet that just anybody could download and look at. And I had no idea what kind of camera, like probably that guy was a cameraman in real life or something. Who knows? So that was my first guy. So and that kit basically was dry brushing and washing. So the original series, they kind of did it by topic, and then we talked about it. And when I did the third series, we talking about techniques instead of effects. So calling it core skills instead of armor and fur. And there's less fur in that one as well. There is some fur, but there's less fur. So then this was my second guy, and I had already I didn't love the dry brushing washing other than on the chainmail. Like that was, I think, what sold me on miniature painting. So like you paint it black and then you dry brush the chainmail on and then it looks like something. I was like, oh, that is so cool. And that's still one of my favorite parts of miniature painting is that moment of transformation when it kind of goes from one thing to another. So it goes from like boring gray and then you put some color on and then you do some dry brushing or layering or whatever and then it has depth. Like that's still kind of one of my favorite parts of miniature painting. So this was my second guy. And you can see the scale difference. This is not a Reaper miniature. I do not recall offhand. It's either Citadel or Ralpartha or one of Grenadier, one of the original old-timey miniature companies. Because what had happened is after I started painting, my husband was like, oh, right, I have a box of these things from when I was trying to paint in the 90s. So we dug them up, and I'm like, well, I don't want to, until I get good, I don't want to spend too much money on good ones. And I actually do not think that this is a good thing to do. My advice now is to paint good quality miniatures, ones that are well sculpted, ones that are well cast. Even if you're old school and you love these older miniatures, I have no problem with that. But every now and then, paint something that's a little bigger, that's a little more sharply defined in the sculpting and the casting to see your improvement, because you can't always tell when you're painting something that's kind of, this was kicking around in a drawer. This one isn't even that blobby, because I called his pile of miniatures the Blobby Knights, because he'd just thrown them all in a box together. These were real lead miniatures. Some of them have lost their details. So I painted a few of these, but then eventually I got smart and I went back to, I think I'll just pay for Reaper miniatures and paint those. And then I got into Darkstar miniatures as well. So that's why he's so much shorter. But I used a similar color scheme, other than I guess I had probably read somewhere about about Triad color schemes, because this is a red, yellow, blue. And let's see. Kuriko, it doesn't believe that she doesn't need 600 plus paints, and I agree. I don't believe that I don't need that either. Butts 1000 remembers the minis in the case at the comic store as a kid, and they seem so mystical. Kuriko agrees that the first time you dry brush is utterly magical. And Butts loves never really knowing how things will come out. And I like that too. So there are people, I think, who visualize really well, and they say, like, I had this vision for what the miniature would look like. I'm like, nope, I kind of am trying to do stuff I think will go together, but I don't really know what it's going to look like until I'm done. This was a learn to paint miniature, so I had a very tiny finished picture. The picture might have been tinier than the guy. I don't even know. So I'm going to work on him. I thought to show you the second one. And then those were like August, September 2003. And then November, I worked on the second Learn to Paint kit. And this is when I really got fed up with dry brushing and washing. Because the kit said, wash the scroll with the black wash, and it'll fall down in the recesses of the text, because there is text sculpted on there. There probably isn't any more, because I repainted this like 4,000 times. But it said, oh, thanks, Chef of Love, for your subscription. That the wash would fall into the recesses and and leave the paper lighter colored. And I was not happy with that, how that turned out at all. I didn't understand that a wash is going to tint everything. There's no magic wash that's just going to go in the recesses and not touch the top. There are techniques you can use to do a little more of that, although I don't think that would have worked on the scroll. But that was when I sort of got fed up with washing and dry brushing, and I didn't do it for a long time after that. And then later I figured out the stuff that most people figure out early on. So those are among my first miniatures. And later I will show you pictures, because it's also interesting how photography has come along. And I don't even have super new pictures of any of those. I thought I did, but I don't. And maybe next time I will take some pictures. But so for a comparison, I think it's fair that I use a similar... Trasharama is fed up with washing as well. No showers for me. I think it's... To make a fair comparison, I should use a similar color scheme, but I'm not committing to using the exact same colors. For one thing, these were Pro Paints. This was the first version of Pro Paint. That's the paints in the little tub. If you are unfamiliar, this is the second series of Pro Paint. This isn't even the first series, but the bottles were very similar. And I believe there were 54 colors, which I eventually... After I bought the first few kits, I would go into the store. Well, I bought all the kits that they had at the time. But then every time we went to the game store, I would buy another color or two until I had all the colors. I had a little checklist and everything from an old catalog, an old casket work catalog. So there was a much smaller color selection then. And I am not going to attempt to figure out what exactly those colors were, but I'm going to paint in the spirit of this color scheme. Other than a lot of what makes painting better is the color scheme. So I don't think I should just go straight into trying to find the colors that exactly match. It's like, if I were improving this, how would I do it? So the main thing I see here is this guy is a little bland, and I think it is because of a color thing, because it's mostly just blue and metal, and those are very cool colors. And then there's like the tan leather parts, and they're not like totally neutral, but it's a fairly neutral tan color. It doesn't have a lot of color in it. And bearing in mind that with this kit, I think there were 6 or 7 colors, and you also had to paint a rat, so there were limitations in the color selections. I'm not judging the person who made the kit. I've been there very recently, in fact, on a project I can't talk about just yet. It's not a kit, though. It's something else. It's an iteration of something you may already have seen, but that's kind of newer. So what could I do color-wise to make this a little more interesting? So, I mean, I have to keep the blue, and I have to keep the silver, or I'm not really in the spirit of this miniature, I would say. So what else can I do? If I look at complementary colors, the color across from blue is orange. I can't really use that in the metal that much. I mean, he's not like an orc or a kobold or someone who doesn't take care of their stuff. You're all dying of curiosity. No, it's not that interesting. Sorry, I think I built that up to sound cooler than it was. It will be revealed pretty soon, I think. The other thing I'm going to work on for Ron this month, I haven't actually even started working on, but I also don't think I'm authorized to show yet, which is the miniature of the month. So I need to get cracking on that. So I can't really use this in the metal. I mean, I could give him gold armor, I guess, or bronze armor, but that might be kind of weird because he's just your basic man-at-arms type of guy. Steel makes more sense. So I could shift the leather to be closer to orange, and I think that is what I do. These guys actually come in a pack of 3 now, so I may do this experiment more than once. I don't know. Or, if one's drying, I can work on another one. Another option I could do is the Triad color scheme. So the Triad color scheme that has blue in it would also include red and yellow. In this case, I wouldn't have to be, I don't have to use this yellow and this red for it to do it. I can use a skin tone that's kind of red, and that would take care of the red part. And then I can use a leather color that's more yellowish. I don't know if I love that idea. There's also green on the base because of grass, so I can either change that if I don't feel like it goes with my colors. That's the thing about the broccoli bases, which we kind of all hate, but they are flexible. Like if I choose to paint that as dirt or stone or something, that's fine. The main reason I hate the broccoli bases on the old metal miniatures is you probably see that there are chips on that, and there have eternally been chips on that. I repainted some of that, and then I just gave up and said I didn't care. So that's why I didn't like broccoli. It wasn't the texture, it was more the, oh my gosh, how do you keep this from scratching the second after you finish painting it? So I think I'll probably go with the blue and the orange, and I could still kind of do red, because I can also just do two complementary colors. So I can do blue and orange with the either the leather or orangey skin, and then I can do red as the complement of green. So I don't think that made sense, but let me show it on the thingy here. So we do green, and yeah, that one does it, I think. No. Well, anyway, two tetrads, or a tetrad, in my opinion, is two. There we go. It's two complements, so you don't even need to memorize what tetrads are. It's just two sets of complementary colors. So red and green in this case. This is the little tetrad square, and then blue and orange. So I think that is what I will do. But I'm going to start by painting the metal, which I think is what the kit had me do. And I'm going to paint it all black, not just the chainmail. Just because I'll have to paint fewer coats of silver, really, if I paint it black. Oh, look at me, ambitiously thinking I can have my palette in the frame. Would it work? We'll give it a shot. I don't think it'll work. I think I will end up putting my palette off to the side like usual. But let's give it a shot. Just going to put Mr. Original over there. So I do have a blue that's pretty similar in the kit, so I will use that. But we're going to start by putting black all over. And I'll probably paint two of them. And hello, Beguiler87. I don't know if I've seen you here before, or if I'm just being forgetful because I am old and my brain doesn't work like it used to. And since I am putting on a lot, I might just ignore the sword for now. I often do not paint weapons until later in the process because I'm likely to end up touching them. Oh, and here's something I didn't even realize until I looked at the sky again. Apparently, and I assume it was when I painted it because I don't remember going back, but it is possible that there was something else I had to practice that I had to paint wood grain on, and I came back and practiced on this, but the wood grain on the shield, which I do not think was part of the kit instructions. I did not prep these guys other than tossing them in isopropyl alcohol to get off any finger grease or whatnot. I think it just helps them, it helps the paint adhere. Soap and water, and then rinse it well works too, just soap and water. But I feel like the isopropyl works just a little better. If he's going in and out of focus or something, let me know in the chat, because he looks in focus every time I look up, but I have been deceived before. So there will be some parts where doing this first is going to make my life more challenging. But since metallic is kind of messy and painting all this black is easier if I can just do everything at a swipe, I think it will be ultimately easier if I, just have to work around the cloth of his sleeves or whatever later. Will I rue this decision? It is possible. For my kit, I tried to choose a guy. Just trying to figure out what's going on with this one here. I mean, it's scabbard. I tried to choose a guy that had like a lot of metal, so you didn't have to worry too much about painting other stuff. My philosophy with the kits has been, see, I'm painting over what's going to be blue. It doesn't matter. I'll fix it later. I want to try to give you a win early on. And I advise, if you're helping someone learn to paint, I advise a similar approach, that you try to pick out figures, for a kid, something like the unicorn or a bear or a wolf or something like that. A boulder monster or fire monster. Something that doesn't have like a lot of fiddly little bits. I think that's much more accessible to a lot of people, because a lot of people really freak out. I mean, you've probably had friends say this, oh, how do you do something so small? So we kind of have to get people over the hump of being concerned about the too small thing. So just in case I decide I want to do some different color scheme or some other thing. And then these are the kind of guys that you would be painting a few of for your games, so it's reasonable to work on a few of them at a time. I don't know if I'll grab the third guy as well. I mean, you heard me say where it took me 8 hours to paint this the first time, so I don't promise that I'm going to finish this episode, but I will finish this. I do think there's a value in painting the same thing or something similar again in a couple of different ways. So I didn't bring them over, but one way is experimentation and iteration. So you try something and it didn't work that great. You can try it again. You can get the same miniature or something similar and try to figure out what didn't go so great and make it better. So if you were here last month, I had painted something with the OSL source light effect on one of the two of the Kickstarter minis, actually. And for various reasons, I had to kind of pull back on that technique a little bit. So I painted another one, quick painting, where I was focusing more on getting the light right. So that's kind of iteration. That's what, you can try a color scheme, particularly if you are painting like an entire army of something. People most often will get like one or two and work out their color scheme before they paint the whole thing, because then you're going to save yourself trouble in the end. If you know your colors are effective, you know that they're decent coverage and you like to paint them, all that kind of stuff. If you figure that out on one miniature, and then if you don't get that miniature right, if you then try it on another miniature, that's a lot less time spent than on the entire army or squad or whatever. So I always find that I have bits that I can't see that I missed while the paint is wet. So I'm getting a few of these bits, but there's going to be more bits later. And we'll let these guys dry for a minute. And I will show you an iteration miniature, which is, when I'm talking about we are experimenting. So the other thing I worked on recently was, where'd he go? There he is. I had painted a completely different version of this guy on this stream, I don't know, late March, early April, something like that. So this is Kobzar Soloveitko. He's a Ukrainian bird bard. So he's the nightingale that's I don't know if it's officially the national bird of the Ukraine, but it's popular in folklore and dear to their hearts, and then the sunflower. And now this is totally non-Ukrainian colors. The first one I painted was Ukrainian colors. These are colors that are in the Bone 6 Kickstarter, which I'm not going to show those colors right now until the Pledge Manager is open. I'm not going to bother much with showing Kickstarter stuff. Wicked MGG asks if I'm doing the armor-based black. Yes, I am. Most metallic paints are going to paint better over a dark color. But also there's chainmail, so then I'm just going to be able to brush over the chainmail and do that more easily than doing chainmail and then doing a black wash over it. It's harder to make sure the black is in all the little crevices and stuff. So this is like a totally different version of Kobzar, and I will show you. I don't have the original on my person anymore, but I can show you a picture on my phone. Well, first I'm going to show this doofus. because somebody was saying, how do you have orange cat hair? We never seen orange cat. This doofus is our orange cat. His name is Corbin. His full name is Corbin Dallas. You may know the movie that we named him for. And he is very much my husband's cat. So he, in this picture, is parked outside my husband's door because he can't believe that the door is shut. And he's tragic about it. He does not like being picked up, and he weighs almost 20 pounds. So this is why you've never seen him, because he doesn't come. If he sees me trying to grab him, if he comes over here, he will run away. And then I have back problems, so I often do not pick him up. I think that's why he's so heavy. He wanted to eat out of me picking him up. And there he is, wondering why I'm not doing his bidding and opening the door. But this is the version of Kobzar that I painted in more Ukrainian colors. So the nightingale, I think it's well, this isn't the, this is the nightingale. I think it's called blue throat. I think the bird is called blue throat. Kroniko says Corbin is very handsome, and I agree. He's very handsome. He is a doofus, but he's very handsome. He's also like a deadly hunter cat. He only goes out on a leash, and he can totally hunt things on a leash with my husband attached to the other end. So he's pretty amazing that way. And although they call the bird the blue throat, this orange color that's on the jerkin is another stripe on the throat. So since that part's covered up in this personification version of the bird, I used it for his clothing. And then, of course, there's the sunflower. But there's another reason I'm mentioning this figure to you, because you could win this figure if you want. Well, if you try. You can win this figure. Of course, I've lost my... So if you go here, they are currently running a raffle with a lot of different prizes. So if you don't like that guy I just showed you, fear not. There are tons of other cool things that you could win. There's a set, I think it's all the expansions for Marvel Crisis Protocol, plus 52 of the miniatures painted by some pretty... did I move the camera again? Yes, I did. My apologies. I'm not trying to make y'all seasick. So you can go, I can't even remember. There's more than 50 items are in the raffle. So there should be something that you would like. So go there, look for something. Erin Hartwell, Corporea, she didn't paint a miniature this time. She painted a painting. So that's something else you could try for. But along with the guy that I painted, you will also get one in the blister pack that Jason Wiebe signed. Jason Wiebe's the sculptor of that figure. And all of the paints that I used to paint him, which were a lot, because you know me, if I don't have to mix it, I don't want to mix it. So there's like 40 paints or something in there. They show you, they have a list of all the paints because I listed them out. Now, what I can't do is, if you've been on my blog, you will have seen like paint recipes for figures I painted where I'll tell you like, well, I use this in the shadows and I use that in the highlights, and this is what I painted the hat with or whatever. I painted this on stream. I wasn't really keeping track. So I can't tell you exactly how I painted it, but you will get an hour consultation with me as part of the raffle winning as well. So that package includes the figure, an unpainted version of the figure that's signed in the blister, a bunch of paints, and an hour of video consultation, or we can do email, whatever the person prefers, with me to ask me painting questions, get feedback on their stuff, whatever they'd like to do. So that's what's in my bundle. But as I say, if you're like, oh, I can't use that guy in my game, I'm not interested, don't worry about it. There's probably something that you can use in your game there. There's a lot of GW stuff. The Nova Charity Foundations tend to get a lot of contributions from people who paint GW. I think they started probably trying to attract that segment of the gamer market. So there's a lot of that, but there's some busts. There's this Marvel Crisis Protocol thing that is super cool. I'm definitely going to throw a few tickets at that. I think I'm going to throw a few tickets at Erin's painting, because I'd love to have a painting by Erin. So these guys are still drying, of course. I might as well slap on the 3rd in case. But actually, I'm going to try something a little different on the 3rd. I am, instead of painting it straight black, I'm going to paint it black plus a bit of the blue. I know that if you follow Michael Proctor, or if you've taken his class on metallics at ReaperCon, he likes to paint over more of a color background. So he doesn't go over a super dark. Actually, I had a better color maybe. In the new stuff, in the expansion colors, I have Storm Chaser Blue, and I have Void Blue. Void Blue is pretty dark, so I'm going to go with the Storm Chaser. Because why not? As usual, I have shaken all of these paints more. I've shaken them before the show, so I'm shaking them more than it looks like on the show. And basically, I'm trying to say, shake your paints more than you see me doing, in a very convoluted way. Apparently, today is not my best word day. This is why I have the blog, because sometimes I don't have good word days. And I can write and rewrite and edit and move things around when I write the blog articles, and I do all of those things. They take way longer than you would think because I review and revise. But I am still going to paint black in the kind of undersides parts. I'm going here. The deep crevices that I don't want to have to worry about painting later. So I advise looking at a miniature for those before you start to paint. Typically I'll use blue liner, but black works too. And then if I end up being able to reach those places while I'm painting, I mean, no harm done. I'm just painting over some initial paint. Then we can do an experiment and see what the... Well, maybe I should save that for another show, because you know we like to do experiments here sometime, and it's been a while. So perhaps I should experiment with, does painting over certain colors of primer or colors for before metallics, does it make a difference? And my theory is that it doesn't really if you do enough coats. Like if you paint enough coats that paint is opaque, it doesn't matter what color you started with. It can certainly be helpful with colors that are transparent to start with something that's kind of like your color, and then, you know, then you have to paint fewer coats of like a red or a yellow. Those colors that just don't cover very well, which is a pigment thing. It's not how paint is made. If you've been here before, you've heard me talk about that people are not trying to rip you off. It's not that there's not enough pigment in there. It's that the microns, or what, for whatever reason, if you go to Ann Forrester's show that's on in the mornings here, she probably has more technical explanations for it. For me, I tend to, I want to understand something enough to know that's how it works, and then I'm good as a rule. I mean, I don't necessarily mind having a little more technical knowledge, but I don't feel like I need to have all of the technical knowledge to make choices or understand what's happening. So I understand why those colors are frustrating, and that's good enough for me. Then after that, what I want to know is how to work around it. And the answer to how to work around it is one of the answers is to start with a color that's similar but more opaque, so like a reddish brown, and then you paint your reds over it. I'm generally just stubborn, and I just paint a bunch of coats of red until it looks like how I want it to look. I'm going to go ahead and fill in on the shield because there are absolutely places that are hard to reach there. So I may try to do the wood grain thing that I insanely did on my first miniature. I seriously have no memory of these events. I have to think that it must have been me grabbing something to practice on, but it does seem weird that I would pick my very first miniature to do that with. I kind of, if I take a class or I have a miniature that's sort of a milestone or something, I tend not to want to mess with it again later. Like, I will totally revise miniatures. You guys have seen me do that, and I'm going to be doing that again as we lead up to ReaperCon this year. I'm going to take old figures and say, okay, here's the critique. I would have given this figure at the show, you know, assuming it wasn't mine, because these are going to be so old that I will not have any qualms about critiquing them. And then see what I can do to fix it. So I did a couple of those last year. I'm going to do some more of that this year. I'm going to see if I can find some miniatures that are kind of more intermediate level as well as more beginner level, to give people at a variety of levels information. So I'm hoping that this will be useful to people watching the show, even if you have no intention of coming to ReaperCon. You might participate in other contests, or you just want to get better in general. But it is con season, not just ReaperCon. Some cons have already happened even. But, you know, Gen Con's coming up. Origins doesn't have like a big miniatures focus thing, but they do some miniature stuff. I think they have a contest usually. What else? There's another show that's like the same weekend as ReaperCon that other people go to that I'm temporarily blanking on the name of. It might be Nova. Although I feel like Nova's in January. So if anyone remembers the other convention, I mean, I know Dragon Con's then, but Dragon Con, I don't think Dragon Con does contests or anything. They have they have vendors there sometimes, and they have games and stuff, but I don't think they really get into miniature painting like as an activity. They might have a paint and take. I think they have a paint and take, but I don't think they have a contest. So that is still drying. Well, I will share. We're going to hope this works. You guys, if you're veterans here, you know how it works when I try to show photographs on my computer screen. But I think I cracked the code, so it should work this time. Because I didn't put these ones on my phone. And I didn't put the other one in here because I'd already started. So this was, oops, go back. Nope, now I'm going too far back. This was I think this was actually the second picture I took, like my first digital camera. And you have to remember how new digital photography was, especially for consumers at this point. I think it was a 1 megapixel camera. So and I don't think megapixels are the whole story with cameras. You only need 5 or 6 or something to take decent pictures. That's one of those numbers that they're trying to sell you the camera that does that because it makes it sound sexy, but the size of the sensor is actually more important. Anyway, that's a whole other topic too. But 1 megapixel is not enough to take pictures of miniatures. So I think this may have been my second camera, and I retook the picture, but I don't remember for sure. And then here, so you can see what photography can make a big difference in how your thing is perceived. But this camera none of these pictures I'm showing you are older than 2004. So these are not even my current camera. So they were good quality cameras for the time, but they wouldn't be considered that great now. Like my phone can probably take a picture as well of this. Play with the lighting and play with using a plain background like this. So I think that was just a piece of construction paper. I don't even remember what that was. I did use construction paper for one of them, but like that gray sheet that I'll put down to show miniatures here, it's a similar thing. It helps the camera focus on it. That's why I can't have my palette with paint in the background usually, because the camera goes all wiggly. So if you're trying to take a picture of your miniature on your desk and there's a bunch of stuff in the background, your phone may not be able to figure it out. But a phone that you bought within the past few years, like a smartphone with a decent camera, it should be able to take pictures of this quality. It's just a question of playing around with the light. How far are you from the miniature? Going back in and maybe experimenting with some of the editing features to see if you need to bump up the exposure or something like that. So this one, I think, was the 2004 camera. And you can see the croppiness of the miniature more than or the painting, I should say. Like you look smoother over here. But you can see that dry brushing better here. Quindy says it is Nova, that it's the same weekend as ReaperCon. I feel like there might even be a third one, but I might be zoning. This was my third miniature. I couldn't find him to bring over to show you. And especially, like, I didn't put the picture on. But in addition to his amazing googly eyes, there was my first attempt at freehand on the shield, which was just a little leaf outline. And that put me off the idea of that for a good long while. So this was, of course, another one from my husband's old box of beat-up lead miniatures. And you can see that I've at least seen the concept of basing, and I think I threw some old tea leaves on there or something. So this one is, I'm not sure why I put that guy second when he was the third miniature. Those eyes are better than mine. Are you sure? Like, I don't think I captured his full he's seen some things, this guy, I guess. He's seen some things, and he's tired of being a ranger, and he's going to retire now. This when you saw the guy live, but this is the oldest camera, I think. Then there's a slightly better camera, and I'm pretty sure that absolutely is just a piece of construction paper. I would recommend something other than construction paper because I think it has enough texture that it might mess up your camera too. And then this is just printed out. Blue fade became all the rage for miniatures photography. So it's like where it would fade from blue to white. And I think this is a printed out piece of paper that has a blue fade. I actually have no idea how I was doing these eyes under these little visors because I'm not sure I could do it now without a lot of frustration. And then this is the lady from the second Learn to Paint kit that was painted a few months after those guys. And her main problem is that she doesn't have enough contrast. So I'm kind of, now that I've seen her, I didn't think about this at the time when I was like, oh, I should repaint my first miniature. And I grabbed a pack of those guys from Reaper while I was there. But I didn't think about grabbing her because I really feel like she would be an interesting one to repaint. So let me know if you all think it might be fun for me to repaint her. The leather color that I used on her is not the color that was in the kit. I think we were supposed to use black. And I half painted, so I still haven't finished the rat from the first kit. I have it around here somewhere. I started it and then I painted over it and I started it again, and like almost literal 20 years later, I still haven't finished it. And then the other figure that was in with her, I think I ended up using him more experimentally. And then we're back to the other one. So I will come back to this view and see if our guys are dry. So I wasn't trying to paint him to look like to follow the instructions. But then he was one of those ones, he sat on my shelf and then I kind of like leveled up in between when I had painted some parts of him, but he wasn't finished. And so he just sat and sat and sat on my shelf and I never went back to him. And I think that's one of the ones I just need to call, like, okay, I'm never going to finish this guy, and that's okay. Like, I don't think your shelf of shame, I think it's okay. Like, one way to resolve your shelf of shame is to finish painting the thing. And another way is to admit to yourself, I will never finish painting this. I don't like this miniature anymore. And that's okay. It can get out of my life and that it is still not weighing you down. I think those are both valid answers to the, even if you play games and, that was meant to be a character or something for the game. If you just don't like the figure, like, just dump it and go get one you do like that you want to paint. All right, so I do not recall if there were multiple colors of metallics in the original kit. I don't think there were. I do have multiple colors of metallics in the kit I wrote, so I'm going to use them both if I can find them. So I put blade steel and filigree silver in. So, the blade steel is kind of more the main color, and then the filigree silver is just for like little highlights and stuff. And I probably come over and do shading on top of some of this as well. Kriniko would be interested in seeing how I would tackle, I think her name is Lorana. And I believe that she was sculpted by Dennis Mize. And I ended up kind of getting into the Dennis Mize miniatures for a while. And I think that was a good thing because he sculpted, he's unfortunately not with us anymore, but he sculpted with a lot of the underlying bone structure, anatomy, and musculature kind of exaggerated. So it helped me learn those landmarks on the human body. So when I started painting other miniatures that maybe weren't as well detailed, or there might have been a little casting flaw or something, I could sometimes paint around it. Characters can change their outfits. That is absolutely true too. If the only thing you don't like about your miniature is the colors, change the colors. I mean, the idea that you're losing time if you try something and it doesn't work is something that really held me back. Or, that I'm wasting time if I like half paint a miniature to practice something, or just because I was doing the kit or whatever, and then I don't come back and paint the other half, that I've wasted that time. I haven't. If I've learned something, if I was sitting and relaxing while I was painting a miniature, that's not wasted time. I use that time, but I'm done with that time. Some of these ideas I think are actually from, remember a few years back there was that lady with the cleaning, and she named it after herself. I'm trying to think of the name of it now. Kondo, Marie Kondo. So the some of the ideas of the Marie Kondo cleaning and clutter method, some of those are mental things, like this idea of sunk costs, like where if you bought something and then you get rid of it, you've wasted money. But if it just sits in your house forever, taking up space and annoying you that your house is too cluttered, you're wasting other things. So the idea is this sunk cost fallacy, that if you put money into something, you have to keep putting money into it. Or friendship even. You have a friend and you had a great friendship, and now your friendship is maybe not so great. You're not like obligated by the time spent in the past to keep spending time with that person if they're not healthy for you to spend time with. That kind of thing. Casmania would like to see me paint the tiefling with the staff for Fathom, then tell Frank, see, I have a staff of power. I'm not sure that Frank would fall for that. He's a pretty smart DM. All right, so we talked about how painting chainmail is super fun because it's going to go from boring black to awesomeness, and the camera's starting to have trouble focusing, isn't it? Well, let's see how it goes. Let's try getting them a little closer. So what I'm going to do instead of straight up dry brushing is side brushing. So let's see if I have something practical to demonstrate on here. So imagine this is the chainmail texture, the little holes. So if we look at it sideways, there are parts that are raised and parts that are depressed. The idea of side brushing is that instead of like scrubbing all over, like with dry brushing, instead of taking all your paint off, you have like a decent amount of paint on there, but you're only applying the bristles to the tops of the texture. So you're coming at it from the side and as much as possible trying not to go pfft. So you're not using the tip because then you're going to end up in these places that should be dark. But if you keep the bristles on its side, that is a really good way for painting textured things with more control than dry brushing. It works pretty well with hair too. So that is what I'm going to try using on the armor. So I've got a round brush instead of the flat brush that I would use for dry brushing. I'm getting it in there, and then I'm taking, I'm just touching this. So I'm not rubbing it all over. I'm just touching it to make sure there's not like a whole big gloop of the metallic on there. And then I'm hoping he's in focus. And I'm running it across the tips, or the tops of the chain. And if the sculpt and cast work with you, this can be a very effective way of doing this. Let's see, I'll zoom in just a little more for a minute so that you can kind of see hold it like that. I think you can see that I'm using the side of the brush. And then I will hold it so we can see a little better. So I'm not too worried about the outer edge. There's like a little edge of trim. I can come back with a brush with a good tip and do that part. I'm just working on the chainmail right now. So it's about as quick, and in some ways it might be quicker, or in some cases it might be quicker than dry brushing, because you're not taking all that paint off and then you can just paint for, a few seconds and you have to load your paintbrush up again. You're painting with more paint on the brush, so sometimes it doesn't take as long to cover stuff over. And it only requires a little bit more care than dry brushing. So this is not me hating on dry brushing. For people who are new, I did like a 3 or 4 series of episodes testing out different dry brushes and experimenting with the effects we can get with dry brushing. I'm cool with dry brushing. I'm not judgmental about it. I just think if you're trying to get effects more like when you see people posting cool things on the Reaper Facebook group or whatever, these are some of the techniques that you're using. It's not always like super detailed, I'm painting every little link by hand or whatever, but they may be using different techniques. Like there are just some things you cannot do with dry brushing and washing. We already discussed how I got frustrated with washing. And then my other frustration with washing, when it does work, is that it often isn't dark enough. So I will go back in and add additional stuff in the crevices or the deeper areas. I mean, most often I will layer, but you can do it with additional washes that you're just placing more deliberately. And then you just use a damp brush along the edge, and you can, you're not going to get a lot of transition lines, particularly on something like if I was shading this chainmail that way. That's very textured. Fur is very textured. Hair is very textured. Texture things, you can do that directed wash or selective wash without having noticeable transition lines. I could get the edges this way if I want. I still just think I'm probably going to use a different brush for that because that will be more edging. This is kind of like edging but on texture, I guess. Is he staying in focus at all? I don't know. Sorry about the clinking, and if it shakes, I think my visor is hitting the camera a little bit. He's got kind of, there's a little arm panel on the side. That I didn't even see until I started looking closer. So I didn't bring it out for the, well, I did and then I forgot about it. But I will often use a different water cup for metallics. This actually says metals on it so that I remember that that's what it's for. So that I minimize the chance of getting the little metal flakes on things that I don't want to have little metal flakes, like his clothes or his skin or whatever. So if that's something that has frustrated you in the past, there is a tip that I'm pretty sure that I stole from somebody else so long ago that I don't remember who I stole it from. All right, and bam, the magic of instant chainmail has occurred. I will add the lighter color to that, but I want to make sure that this has a second to dry. So I'm going to look for parts I missed and then work on the panels. I mean the flat panels more. And those I will ultimately end up coming at in the other direction, I suspect. I'm going to paint metallic on, and then I'm going to come back and add the shadows. And just to, we can do like a quick test, because I don't have any, I didn't paint any black paint on here. So that's what a coat, so just one coat of the blade steel looks like on the plain gray, and that's what it looks like on the black. So I agree with Anne that I think you get to, a shinier, more complete looking metal. And in fact, this isn't a very fair test because I think what a lot of people would be comparing it against is painting over a white base coat. And even I got a replacement Sir 4 scale that was in the grayer bones so that he won't look overexposed on screen. So I don't even have my, I have a white bottle cap. Let's see. It may be too, yeah, you can see how you can see a lot of the white through there. So that's the point of painting the dark color. If I come back, well, in fact, I'll leave that there since why do I care if there's some metallic on this bottle cap. So we'll pretend I was painting over white primer or white bones. And I'll let that dry, and then I'll come do a second coat. And it will turn opaque. I'm a little distracted right now because do you ever have that thing where your eye twitches? I'm having one of those with my left eyelid, and it's not typically something that happens while I paint, so it's a little bit distracting. So I'm not worrying too much about, maintaining the black line. You can, and it's probably a more efficient way to paint if you maintain the black in the crevices. But I will just come back and put lining in. For some reason, I find it less stressful to do lining than to paint precisely and leave the black there. But if you can train yourself to leave the black there, first of all, that you're building your brush control. And that's why I don't do it, and I should do it. But second of all, I mean, you save a little time. But you're building your precision. Doing lining, you're building your precision too. But it's easy to talk yourself out of doing something you have to do at the end. So I switched, and this is one of my, this is what I would call this not my first string brush. When my sable brushes get older, I try to use those ones for metallic. I know some people are like really kind of like, oh, never use your sable brushes on metallics. I don't, there's a little metal flake in there. There's texture on everything I'm painting. There's texture on paper that you would paint with these. You don't want to get it up in here. Maybe that's what people are freaking out about. I don't know. But I don't think it means the instant death of a sable brush if you use metallics on it. If I can, I'd rather use one that's a little worn out. I have a bunch of tiny brushes that, that I don't use for other stuff. Well, not a bunch, but I have several tiny brushes that I don't use for other things. So if I have to use them for precision metallics paintings, I'm okay with them having that function. But even if I use my real brush, my current favorite brush, it's not gonna be the end of that brush if I get metallic on it. Every great once in a while. Now, places where it's sticking out, like right there, when I mentioned edging earlier. So that's kind of, you're using things crosswise. So that's how I would paint a highlight on the edge of that sword. Let's see. I do this angle. So it's like this. So again, the bristles are straight. They're not going to go all over the place, and you're not using the tip for that to go all over the place. So there are, that little edging around his arm, or where the places poke out, I can use that technique to apply paint without having to be really, even here, I could probably do it. So even if I don't have the brush control to use the tip of the brush to do that, I can use the texture that the sculptors have very kindly provided us to do it. And this is great. He doesn't have a cloak, but if you say someone had a cloak, this is great to do on kind of like the hem of their cloak where it's billowing up and you want to get a little extra highlight. You just do that edging thing. I did miss a plate. Over here under his chest strap. Oh, and I guess I didn't even put black on that plate. All right. I think I'm just going to check the places on the chainmail. And here the sable brush may not be firm enough to be doing the side brushing very well, because I could see that There was some going into the parts I would rather have stay black that I wasn't noticing as much with the synthetic brushes. So different kinds of brushes definitely have their place. So he's already looking more sparkly. So let's make him look more sparkly still. Is this dry? Yes. So I'll paint another coat on here, and I'll overshoot so that we can compare one coat versus two coats. So, in my opinion, if you do 2 or 3 coats of metallic, it's going to cover. But metallics are a little thicker, so doing the black or another color coat also has the benefit of not building up too much texture that might fill in small parts like these, the chainmail and stuff. Check for white on the other ones. All right, so now I'm going to get the lighter color metallic and add a little highlight. Just going to do the chainmail for now. I'm going to come back and do something else with the plates, even though they aren't huge. So here, I don't want to put it everywhere like I did with the other one. I'm not trying to bring out the texture. I'm trying to suggest that light is shining more in some places. And the same thing with dry brushing. Like, you can kind of control where you're dry brushing. But this, I think, gives you just a little bit more control. So I'm trying to focus it kind of where the things are facing up. The shapes, I mean, by things. The plates and, shoulders and whatnot. And I am checking to see, this brush has a little hook tip because I can't get a brush to not have a hook tip if I use it for more than 5 seconds. But I just want the hook tip facing up. And so as long as I check that, it's facing up, this side brushing technique works fine. Just do a little bit where it's going out over his hips and a little bit where it's coming up over his shoulders. So I really only put the highlight in a very small number of places. And I probably could go even brighter still. Now, I don't tend to like these really light colors just straight up. Like, if I put some of that on here, it's really going to cover for me, I think. So I like to start with the darker, at least a slightly darker metallic. All right. So to shade the plates, which are not huge, I'm going to get just a little bit of that blue and mix it with my black. And then it doesn't help because the paint is shiny. So putting my palette on screen, I don't know if it's ever going to be valid. Maybe someday I'll figure out how to have a palette cam. I'm going to start with the not as dark blue. If there is room on my desk for anything else. And I will sometimes do that with the shading as well, like for metallics. I won't necessarily have just one value or one color. I might start with a lighter one and then have a darker one just in the crevices. Or the deepest areas. And I didn't even really thin down this paint. But sometimes you have to, the metallic paint can be a little bit like trying to paint on original Bones plastic. It's like it kind of repels the water a little bit and you have to come back in again, or just have a little more paint on your brush than you would painting something else. When you are doing the shading over. So if you're not painting over black, or you're not adding your shadow before you put the metallic on, I guess is what I'm trying to say. And the armor plates are pretty small, so there's really only so much I'm going to be able to do here. dry a little. Apologies if you can hear my husband. I think he forgot to close his door. And then the other thing I'm going to want to do, and this is, so I don't try to line around these little circles. I'm just going to paint the whole circle black. But making sure that I go over the edge so that it is on the, he doesn't have those on the back of it. But there's a couple of little ones right here. And I would do the same thing for painting non-metallic metal or like any kind of texture like that. I do see that there's a couple places that I missed putting the edges on before I, so I do that while I'm giving that other stuff a chance to dry. And there I hadn't made sure that my tip was nice, since this is a second string brush. It doesn't have an amazing tip anymore. And let's put some of that brighter color on those as well. But again, not the whole thing. So I'm going to put it in similar places that I put it on the flat plates. So the idea is this is kind of the hot spot where the metal is shining a bit more from the light hitting it. And the more you do stuff like this, the easier it's going to be if you decide that you do want to like bust out some non-metallic metal. Because you'll already be thinking about where should it look lighter and darker and all that kind of stuff. Put a little of that lighter color on the edges of these plates. Oh, and I see that I forgot a plate now. The one that I had to go back and paint black. Yeah, we can put some of this filigree silver on the back as well. And then this is, I'm going to get the synthetic brush back. So if we zoom way in, I don't know if it's going to show. But there, you can see there's like a little hook on the end of that. But you can kind of get a round brush and you press it against your palette and you make it a little bit like a spatula. So it's a little bit flat instead of being all the way around. Let's see if that helps it focus. You can see it's thinner there than it is if I look at it in this orientation. So it's a little spatula now. And you can do this with a nice brush too, but I just wanted to demonstrate that this will even work with a less nice brush. If I touch the flat part of the spatula that is not the hook to these raised rivet type things, I can get paint just on the top, and then I'm leaving that black line around the edge. So I'll do it. So here's, if I was forming my brush and I wanted the point to be nice and pointy, I would be kind of spinning it around. With this, I want to push it down. And I might even do it from both sides. So I'm getting a little bit of paint off, but I'm making it flat. And I haven't painted his belt buckle yet, because so there I goofed a little and I got paint where the black edge should be, but it's not the end of the world. And these ones are very tiny, so I'm going to take some of that extra paint off. Make sure I'm good and flat. And then the other thing is think about going like this. So instead of making a stroke for these, so instead of making a stroke, Think about you're like just going up and down. So you just start up, you touch down, you lift off. Start up. Let's see, I gotta find where the flat bit is. Touch down, lift off. I'm less likely to get the tip places where I don't want it to be if I'm up and up. And then now I just have to fix that one little, and I don't have to, but I'm choosing to fix the one little spot where I painted over the edge. And I can come back and let's see, I think I do have a smaller synthetic brush. I thought I pulled one out. I did, and then I lost it apparently. All right, well, I'm just going to use the real hairbrush, but it's a similar thing. I just want a little more control because I'm going to take that lighter color silver and come back. And if I can, on these big ones, I just want to hit like half of or just a dot. I don't want to cover up all of the blade steel. I just want to add a little highlight with the filigree silver. And I notice there's a couple more of these rivets on his, whatever that armor piece is. You know, the class I'd like to take at ReaperCon or somewhere else is, what is the name of all this crap? Because I just paint it, so I don't know, but I bet sculptors or somebody knows. People in the SCA. I was just making up the names of what the clothes and armor pieces are. I'm not going to attempt the highlight thing on those little tiny ones. Sometimes I might just even use the brightest color. So there's the chainmail and the armor plates. And where's Mr. Original Guy? So I guess he had a brighter metallic, or I built up more coats. But also you can see there's really no lining or anything on Mr. Original Guy. So I've added a lot more depth here. But he does not look as bright. It is true. But I think I'm going to be okay with that. At least on this one. Maybe I'll iterate and try and get lighter on that guy sometime. But yes, I've been thinking a lot lately about the value of painting the same miniature more than once. I think I should do the skin. I'm just going to, you see these little wrinkles on my palette with this new kind of palette that I have? That is the sign that I need to add water. So I'm just going to add a little water. I think probably you can even probably saw part of it disappear because it'll kind of fix itself most of the time. But where it doesn't, I can just smooth it out. But yeah, almost all of them, the ones that you couldn't see, they all fix themselves. So this was one of those areas where I think it being the limited paint palette of a Learn to Paint kit was a bit of a penalty, because this is not what we would call the world's most natural skin tone. I mean, this is one pasty guy. He has a severe need for vitamin D, among other things. So just to compare him with Lorena, who has a very, warm skin tone, but this guy is maybe he's a vampire and his fellow Anurians need to ask him some questions. I don't know. But I want to paint my guy with a bit of a warmer skin tone. And in fact, to be let's see. So if I'm using those, two complements is my color scheme, and I know I've got blue, so I have to have orange, and if I want to paint the ground grass, then I have red. So if I could paint his skin tone either kind of orangey or kind of reddish, but then the leather parts are going to have to be the opposite. I think since there will be blue cloth right around his face, then I'm going to go with the orangey skin tone. Assuming I can figure out what to use for an orangey skin tone. So if I look at the Learn to Paint kits, I'm not going to look just at the skin colors. I'm also going to look at browns. Because if you remember me goofing around with the oxide colors a little while ago, I ended up making some great skin tones out of browns. So, oh, I haven't done the swatching on the new ones yet, but these are colors. So this is woodland brown. This is not a skin tone, but I've used woodland brown as a skin tone on multiple occasions, and it worked very well. And this is Scholar Flesh, and this is Dark Highlights. And then two that are from the expansion set are Caucasian Flesh and Suntan Flesh. So thinking about highlights, I want whichever one has more yellow or orange, which I think is the Caucasian Flesh. These have different names now, I think. So this is the newer name. When the Bones colors first came out, they were kind of named for jobs, and there was some question about whether that was the way to go. And it was decided that was not the way to go. So they have different names now, some of these colors than what I have. So Suntan Flesh is a little bit orange. I'd say the Woodland Brown is more orange. Dark Highlights is not very orange at all. I think I'm going to go with the Suntan and then add some Harvest Brown. Or use Harvest Brown in the shadows. But I'm going to start pretty dark. There's not a lot of space to work with for the skin. So if I start closer to my shadow color. Nico, I just assume that most pieces of armor end in elite. So I'm going to mix, I forgot I have Ebony Flesh over here too. So I'm going to mix Ebony Flesh and Harvest Brown for like my darkest color on this guy. I will keep him as a Caucasian person, just a slightly less vampiric one. For this version. Again, that might be something to iterate later. Keep that Suntan Flesh for something else though. So keep those to the side. So I'm just trying to tilt his skin a little to the orange. It doesn't have to be like crazy in your face orange. Just if there's some orange elements that will accent the blue, and then vice versa. It will accent his face because he's going to have blue cloth right beside it. And unlike 20-year ago me, I am not going to worry about the eyes right now. I'm just going to have darkened crevices. Because otherwise you guys are just going to sit here and watch me paint eyes for 30 minutes and nobody wants it. I'm also being a dummy by painting the hands before I paint some of this leather stuff, but so be it. I may bring my life interesting because I don't know if there are reddish armor colors in the Learn to Paint kit paints, but then you'll just get to watch me play around with mixing more. Is he staying in focus, or have we reached the point where it will no longer focus with the palette in existence? This is definitely going to need 2 coats. So for fun, I can try doing more of a reddish skin tone version of this guy. So I will take that same ebony black, ebony skin, where did it go? Ebony Flesh, which is a color I love. If you watched my episode on painting darker skin tones, and there's a article on my blog on this topic where you can see still pictures. This is the color that I used. I wanted to paint very dark skin color, so that color was kind of my mid-tone. But since this is more of a Caucasian skin, it's going to be the basis of the shadow color. So I'm just going to mix straight up red in here instead of trying to find a kind of red, like the kind of orange that I got there. I know for years, like, the idea of mixing a skin tone seemed like the most intimidating thing, but browns are actually probably easier to mix than anything else. Like, you don't need your colors to be, you know, you're not trying to mix a bright green and you've got the wrong yellow and you've got the wrong blue. You're trying to get browns, so it's okay if your colors get muddier. Whereas this is definitely not true for a lot of colors. Trying to mix purple. Purple's tough. That's one reason I put purples in those expansion sets is, I mean, red and blue do make purple, but they don't always make a vivid purple. The purple they make might be great for various tasks. I mean, I like to use purple a lot in the shadows of skin tone, and they'll mix. You know, if you don't get a nice purple, the kind of purple you get is probably great for that. But if you're trying to paint, you know, imperial something or other, or, you know, a mystical wizard with cool purple stuff, just mixing red and blue isn't always going to do the trick. You're going to need particular reds and particular blues. So yes, while this is drying, I will just quickly demonstrate for fun. So I have the blue, is dragon blue. Well, we had that other blue too. What's that other blue? How do I lose paint this well? It's a very special talent. Storm chaser blue. And then I have two reds. I have brilliant red and dragon red. So let's see what purples we get. My guess is we will not get purples that you're going to think of as super awesome purples. And for me, I don't think of this as wasting paint because I'm showing you guys stuff. But if you're on a budget and you don't want to do this kind of thing with your paint, if I wait till the end of my paint session and I still have this blob of blue here and I have that little bit of red from where I was mixing in to the skin tone, I can mix those two together before I clean out my palette and see what I get. So I recommend doing that. If you have leftover stuff on your palette, goof around with color mixing to start becoming more comfortable with it. So this one isn't terrible. It's kind of pinky. It's not, you know, superly purpley, but you could use that for cloth. It would be all right. This one is more subdued, which I think that would be great in skin shadows and some other things. But if you're thinking of, you know, royal purple or whatever, that is not the color you're thinking of. Very likely. And then this one's even less saturated. And this one is probably going to be the most desaturated. So these are useful purples, but if you're trying to make, you know, this, if you're trying to make this, and that's what you're getting, you're going to get frustrated with color mixing. But it matters which red and blue you have. So this is why I put these purples in the expansion sets so that you can have a purpley purple without being concerned what reds and blues that you have. So you can see that's way richer than those ones I was mixing. And I mean, this is true of fancy artist paint too. If you don't have the right red and the right blue, you're going to get colors like this. These are a little more subdued because there's probably white and or black in some of the colors that I was mixing with. But the same thing happens with fancy artist paints. If you don't have the right fancy artist paint colors to make a, you know, a bright green or a bright, oh wait, that's the wrong color on this guy. I was putting the red on the orange guy. So I just grabbed a brush, a wet brush, and rubbed it off. And I was trying not to scrub too hard because I just put down the first layer of paint, so I would be taking some of that up if I scrub very hard because it's fresh paint. But if I'd painted that like a few days ago, I could use a stronger scrubbing motion and it would be fine. Acrylic paint takes a little while to set, but once it does set, you can erase mistakes more than you think. And then if you can't erase, you just paint over. It is low stress. Don't stress yourself out. His face is not quite dry. Alas. You can certainly make your life easier and paint those as gauntlets, but I wanted to have a little more skin showing on him for the color. You know, the complementary color being stacked on. I didn't add some dark to this one's eyes. Socket area. So, go in a little more. There's the orangey base and the reddish base. And, you know, this red might end up being a little too red, but I can adjust that later. So once this dries, I'm going to start wanting to work up the color. I have, if I mix more of the orange in, I get that, and that seems like kind of too orange, not quite person colored orange. So I'm instead going to take the suntan and add some of my harvest brown to that. And this is if I decided that I wanted the armor to be the orangey part, I would have used this harvest brown as the kind of mid-tone color of that. But I need it to be a little darker. Or I need to have more steps, basically. You know me, I don't like my steps. That is how I paint. I'm a member of Anne's Patreon, but I'm very, very behind in watching the videos. So I was watching some videos to kind of entertain myself while I was working on my project, where there was just boring parts. You know, sometimes there's just grunt work parts on a project. And it was interesting seeing some of the things we do. Like, we both like the same kind of paint. We both basically paint with the same style of painting, which is layering and then some glazing. But we definitely do work differently in some respects. So she always thins her paint, and she thins her paint like a lot in comparison to how much I thin my paint. And I just thought that was kind of interesting. Because, I mean, she was saying kind of the minimum that she'll do for a wash is 1 drop of paint to 6 drops of water. And I'm like, wow. I have, you know, things that I've put out where I'm like, and add 1 drop of paint and 2 drops of water, and there's your wash. Because I customize it to color. But I guess she likes building up the washes a little more. I don't know. It's just one of those things that's interesting about watching different people paint, which is one reason I recommend it, and something that's one of the values of going to something like ReaperCon is the opportunity to get to do that. Watch people paint, I mean. So I'm mixing up kind of a range of skin colors. And I was just goofing around with putting a little more, a yellowy orange, which was where did it go? The marigold yellow. But it's strong, so it was really just a little bit on the bristles of my brush to add a bit of orange. And we'll see. Maybe I'm way off base and this skin is going to look crazy. But I'll be able to use thin layers of paint to dial back the crazy, if that is the case. Okay, you know what? This is a second string brush. That's why I was using it on the metallics. So I'm going to go get a brush that will actually hold a point for 5 seconds. And then I'm going to throw that brush around. Because I am not very coordinated. This is why I wear specific shirts for painting. Because every now and then the brush will just fly out of my hands. And fly up. And touch my shirt. Well, and then the other reason is then regardless of how many drops of water I put in my wash, when I'm stirring it, sometimes it goes all over the place and splashes. Now, where I did add some water to these paints is when I started getting into the colors that included the highlight colors. And Anne talked about, you know, she adds even more water to colors with white as a rule are going to be more opaque, and they're often literally thicker as well. So if you have trouble getting nice transitions with the layering technique when you're working, you know, you're going up and up to lighter colors, it may be that it's because you're not thinning your paints as you go to those lighter colors. And that is what you need to do. So working down in shadows will often work a little better because shadow colors are typically a little more transparent. And if you want to learn more about paint properties and color properties and Reaper paint in particular, I do recommend Anne's Patreon. So depending on your level, there are videos as well as PDFs. The PDFs will have, you know, here's, if you wanted to paint blue, here's colors you could use as shadows and highlights for various kinds of blue. Which I know that is a tough thing for figuring out sometimes. So if you are someone who finds that a bit tough, you might want to look into her Patreon. And I think she has, if you go to her YouTube channel, I think she has, patrons get them first, but then she has like a series of foundation videos that are, oh, he's not remotely in frame, is he? That are freely available. So you can have a watch and see if you think that you like her instructional style. All right, is he in focus? think so. And I might even come back later and make him more orange, but we'll go with this for now. Quickly work on his hands. There's some kind of, I can't tell if it's a divot or something sticking out. I did not look at the mold lines or whatever on this figure, which I'm usually pretty keen on at least taking care of the worst of things, but the mold lines are actually, I'm impressed. They're not bad at all. I am thus far not filled with regret for not having done this in advance. Am I keeping him in frame at all? I often do not go quite as light on other parts of the body as I do on the face, because I want the face to be the focus. So if I have high contrast between like the eye sockets or the eyeliner and that bright highlight under the cheek, that helps draw attention. I do like to highlight knuckles some though. This is not very smooth, so I'm just going to take kind of color in between, which also has some of the orange, so I'm happy to have more of that represented. In fact, why don't I put a little bit more of that right here? And for male lips, I don't like to have too much pink in them. It just is really easy for it to start seeming like lipstick. So probably just use colors that I used on him elsewhere. I feel like the hands need at least a little bit more highlight. They seem very dark in comparison to the face. I'm just kind of bringing up the overall color a bit more and leaving the shadow mostly in between the fingers. That's already looking a little better. Then we'll add some highlights. So sometimes that's part of what painting is. You gotta take a step back and take a look. And a literal step back is very helpful. I can't do that here on the show, but so I have a shelf that if you, oh no, the camera isn't set up right for you to see it today. Some days you can see behind me in the shelf, I've noticed. But so I have like a bookshelf, and I've set up a shelf that's at my eye level. So when I walk in this room, I walk past a shelf where my in progress miniatures are over there at eye level. And then also not just in my bright lights, they're just in regular room light. And honestly, the room light of this light of this room is very bright. Like I took off the shade. My husband calls it the surgery. So it's pretty bright in here, but it's at the edge of the room, so it's further away from the light. And I like to put my in-progress miniatures up there and take a look at them now and then. And if they aren't looking great over there, if they're like fading into the background, they don't seem to have any pop, then I know there's not enough contrast, or I haven't put the highlights in the right place, or there's some other problem with them, and I need to figure out what that problem is and fix it. So sometimes you can figure out a problem while you're painting. Like just now I looked at, all I had to do was, take my magnification off and look at him on the screen or like this and go, okay, those hands are way darker than the face. That doesn't look right. It's going to look like weird colored leather or something. But sometimes if you're working on a figure that's for a gift or to enter a contest or something that you're going to be working on over a period of time, sometimes you need to take a break or come back and look at it the next day. You can't always figure out what's wrong with something in the moment while you've been staring at it for 2 hours or however long you've been painting. Sometimes you have to be able to step back and put your brain into kind of viewing mode instead of painting mode. So that's the orangey skin. And now I want to paint more of a reddish skin. But I'm going to turn my palette around because I've run out of space in the area that I can access easily. Just a little bit of that ebony flesh probably. And then I'm going to use the suntan. Just checking if I had other skin. I had that woodland brown. Dark highlights is a little bit reddish, but I'll just use the suntan that I used with the other one and just use a bit of red instead of orange. So I'll use all the same colors other than I'm using a touch of red instead of a touch of orange. Quindy is sharing some links to find more information about Anne's Patreon and YouTube, and she has a page. Like a web page, I mean. I don't think she does articles and stuff the way I do, but I think she probably has galleries of her figures and other cool stuff to look at. Okay, now I can't see from the glare. So I'm normally a little more methodical when I'm painting things that I am spending more time on. I mean, with mixing the highlights and the shadows and stuff. But this is meant to be like quick painting. And this is probably how I would do it, quick painting. That is one of the values of wet palette, is being able to kind of put out a set of, okay, we have reached the point where it doesn't want to focus on the guy, haven't we? Yep. Try putting this to the side. The problem I always have with trying to do the blend from one color to another on the wet palette is the color that I need to use the most of, it'll run dry, and then I have to figure out how to mix it anyway. So I mix the way Anne does for the ceramic palette, but I use a wet palette unless I want to be really, really, really super smooth, and then I use the same palette Anne does. And I put sponges on top of it to preserve it from paint session to paint session. So it becomes a reverse wet palette. So if I want to keep my paint in working condition for more than one session, I use Anne's palette, but put not even damp sponges. I mean, they're almost soaking wet sponges. They're just wrung out enough that they're not going to drip water into my pools of paint. I use a wet palette to keep my paint wet during my paint session. I don't expect it to be particularly usable the next day. Every now and then I'll like get a little smidge and do a touch up on something, but I like fresh paint. And I cannot lie. Try to get him about the same value skin tone as the other guy. He is very pink, I will say. I don't know if I've made him too pink. We'll find out. Now for this type of skin tone, if I did want to start with pre-made paints, there's the Rosy Skin Triad. It's very nice. For skin tone with some red in it. But I committed to using just the paints from the Learn to Paint kits and the expansions, so that one was not an option for me today. I don't do that every show. If someone's new here, I will often pick out a set of colors that are specific to the project that I'm doing. But for this project, I thought it would be kind of interesting to have a more limited set of colors like I would have had at the time that I painted the first guy. And then also I didn't have to make a bunch of decisions in advance. I won't lie, that was part of the reason. I think that the nasolabial fold is what that is, that fold that goes from the corner of your nose down. And in general, you can paint male figures with much more pronounced facial wrinkles and expressions and stuff like that. If you're trying to paint a female figure to look like a young, attractive woman with smooth skin, or a child, or an elf, you kind of have to paint fairly smoothly and go easy on the expression lines and stuff, or it won't look that way, basically, which is a whole thing. But we don't really consider faces with a lot of expressions to be pretty. There's a discussion to be had there, but that is definitely not a topic for today. So there's the pinky version, and there's the orangey version. So it's not like a massive, this guy's red and this guy's orange, but it's still going to play into the color scheme. It's still going to resonate with the blue more than if I, use the more neutral skin tone. Or if I'd use the red skin tone with the blue. I mean, the red, I am going to use the red skin tone with blue, but in a different, I'm going for a different set of things. It'd be interesting to see which one looks best with the blue cloth, even though I guess, where are we? Yeah, I guess I'm not getting this guy finished anytime soon, and I'm maybe not even finishing any blue today. But, oh, and I didn't paint his little hands. Maybe I would like to do that. So I did not get as far as I had expected to, actually, but I will probably keep painting on this guy next week so we at least get to the blue parts. So I don't know if any of you have stories you'd like to share about figures that you painted and you painted again. I definitely think if you're feeling down on your painting, grab something that you painted before, grab a figure that you painted before and paint it again and compare it to your original. So don't repaint your original guy, or you're not going to be able to do this. You have to keep him, because you don't want to compare just to photographs either. Photographs, we're painting 3D objects. A 2D photograph is not going to show you everything about your figure. But I definitely recommend doing something like that. And even, these Anurians, if you already painted this one, there's some guys in a different pose, so then you'd have some other figures for your game or whatever. So you don't necessarily have to paint exactly the same figure to get the benefit of this, but it's certainly easiest to see the difference if you paint exactly the same figure. So before I sign off, I will try. I already told you about Anne's show. Anne's show airs mornings, so I think it's 11:30 Central Time, which is Reaper time. And that's every day, Monday through Friday. I'm on Monday. The Crow's Nest, which I believe tomorrow will not have the Crow. The Crow is working. But Jason will be there, and he will be talking to Joseph Wolf, the writer of Reaper's new Dungeon Dwellers RPG, which you can download the beta rules for off the Reaper website. I bet Quindy will be nice and put a link into the chat. So if you want to have a read of those before the show tomorrow, you could come prepared with questions, or tell Joe areas where you'd love a little more information, or what parts you thought were like amazing and fantastic and you're looking forward to trying, or whatever you'd like to talk to him about. Then Wednesdays is Miniatures Den with Luca, the Italian painter, and that's at 1 p.m. Reaper time. So you can get a bit of the European spin on things. And the Europeans, even regionally, I think they paint a little different. But definitely if you look at kind of the overall European approach to painting and the overall approach of painters in the United States, there are definitely some differences, although there's lots of cross-pollination between us. Then Thursdays is the Crafty Creative at, I'm going to say 2 p.m. I have a cheat sheet, but I'm not looking at it because I'm trying to finish painting this guy. With Josh Foreman, and he does terrain and maquettes, and he's indeed crafty and creative. Then Thursday night is the show that you're probably familiar with, which is Reaper Live, and you get updates on miniatures that are coming out, and what Reaper's up to, and ReaperCon class tickets, and all that kind of stuff, which are not going to be on sale yet, but they're going to tell you they're going to be on sale soon, I bet, because we've been submitting. Yeah, I feel like those hands match. And then Friday is Reaper Land in the afternoon, and I'm blanking on the time again. I'm going to say 3 for that one. With John and Dave, who are both people that work at Reaper. But that's like a community show. I think they show off people's paint jobs, do marble races, have all kinds of fun. And then every other Friday is Reaper Errant, which is where myself and some of the other Reaper artists play role-playing games and yell at the sculptors about making the monsters that killed us. That's run by Nightheart Gaming. And then every once in a while, when the stars align, you get the House of Vex, which is the very talented airbrush painter. Well, he's talented with the regular brush too, but he's notably talented with an airbrush, Aaron Lovejoy. He taught me to get over my fear of airbrushing. So there's the original pasty guy, and this is the one with a bit more red in the skin, and this is the one with a bit more orange in the skin. So hopefully he's already looking a little better, but I think it'll definitely be interesting when we get to the blue cloth. So I hope everyone enjoyed that. And I think I will keep doing this because in a way I think this kind of is starting to qualify for our con prep, talking about, critiquing miniatures, looking at what makes a miniature click just that little bit better than another one. exploring color, stuff like that. I know you guys like me to mix it up, but it'll be mixed up in the sense that I'll work on the blue and the leather next time, and I'll probably work on, just finishing parts up off stream, but we'll see. So thank you all for coming. I really appreciate that you did. I am just going to put this back in frame as I sign off. Please go here and take a look, not upside down maybe, and see if there's anything you'd like to enter the raffle for. And I'll see you guys next week. Thank you, Queenie, for all the work, and Beguiler 87, Kirinico. I'm so glad you guys come and talk with me, and it always makes my Monday. But I bet Queenie's going to find us a raid where you can find someone. Oh, and I of course hit the camera again. Where you can find someone else who's doing like cool hobby stuff to enjoy. And I will attempt, hi Anki 2014, to be less lame with the camera next week. Bye everybody.